I was born with a whole lot of dark existential angst, and I need to continually channel it into tangible form that I can give to someone and it impacts their life. From my earliest moment, I was like, why am I here? What is the meaning of life if we all ultimately expire? And what am I meant to do with this brief time here on Earth? Nihilism is that deep, dark sense of meaninglessness when you don't believe you are capable of finding meaning. Building Melissa and Doug gave me everything, and it allowed me to be a role model to my own kids of needing to find that thing in your life. You know, someone who was in such a state of utter darkness and meaninglessness would ultimately end up making toys for children.
Welcome to the Trailblazers, the space where high-achieving women finally exhale and feel deeply understood.
We are Brittany Anderson and Disha Solanki, two leaders who have built, scaled, exited, and supported multi-8 and 9-figure companies
while carrying far more than most people ever see.
Here we go where most conversations stop.
The burnout, the pressure, the ambition, the identity shifts, the invisible load, and the moments you almost quit.
This is where the real story begins.
Trailblazers. Every once in a while, we get the opportunity to sit down with someone whose work has shaped millions of lives, but whose personal journey is even more powerful than the success story that people see from the outside. Today's guest is someone whose work has quietly shaped the childhood of millions of families around the world. As the co-founder of Melissa and Doug, Melissa Bernstein helped build one of the most beloved toy brands of the past 3 decades, inspiring creativity, imagination, and hands-on play for generations of children while growing the company into a billion-dollar success.
Melissa's story is so compelling, not only because of what she has built, but alongside that building was a deep personal journey. Behind Melissa and Doug is a woman who has been willing to speak openly about the deeper questions so many high-achieving women have. Questions around identity, purpose, fulfillment, and what it really means to create a life that feels aligned and successful. Melissa, it's such a privilege to have you here with us today on the Trailblazers.
That was such a beautiful introduction. It made me tear up. Thank you so, so much. I'm so honored to be here.
Oh, it is our great pleasure to have you. So, Melissa, there is a lot to unpack today. But before we talk about the company and the journey and everything else, who was Melissa before the world ever even knew the name Melissa and Doug?
Oh, it's funny. I was just at a meeting and we went in this like maker space and we got to make a little keychain and write something on it. And I made it for myself because I knew no one in my family would want one of these clunky wooden keychains. And I wrote on it, I live to create. And I think if I had a motto to define me, it would be that I was born with a whole lot of dark existential angst, and I need to continually channel it into tangible form, ideally form that I can give to someone and it impacts their life. So I think for me, I am a creator at my heart, and I try to do it as genuinely and authentically as I can.
Were you always a creator, Melissa? Would you say that would describe you typically when you were younger?
Always. Yes. I think, in my early days, I created a lot of dark products. I was channeling all that darkness into more darkness. So from the time I was 2, I wrote music, I wrote verses, I drew, but it was very, very dark because I think everything I was experiencing was so dark. And unfortunately, it couldn't touch others in that level of darkness because it scared them. And when I got the reaction from people seeing these creations, it was not like, oh my gosh, thank you so much. This is amazing. It was like, why are you doing things like this? Like, what is wrong with you? You don't need to be creating things like this. So I think I was always creating. It just wasn't completing the circle of meaning because that creation was never able to leave the dark recesses of my drawers and mattresses and pockets.
I'm going to pull this one way. So, when you think about I'll frame it like this. I was reading something the other day, and it talked about how for a lot of entrepreneurs out there, especially highly driven, highly successful, maybe there's been tumultuous moments in the past, in the life, et cetera, and so forth, that there were actually cues along the way that would lead to the life that they decided to build and the life that they ended up with. So for you, Melissa, when you think back, because I would imagine like as a kid, you're creating in a level of darkness and people are looking at you going, wait a second, like what's going on here? And you're on the inside trying to express and create and do all these things to get it out. So do you find looking back that there were actually any cues or clues that led to the life that you ended up with?
Ooh, that's a really good question. I like that. I don't think anybody's ever asked me that. Good one. You know, in studying sort of this highly sensitive personality a lot, there's this concept of dynamisms, which are like these little jet propulsion cells in your soul that sort of move you to seek something more. And I would say in my darkest times throughout my childhood, I always asked the question, why? And I think I always needed and wanted to know why I was here and sort of what I was meant to do while I was here. And although I didn't know the answer, and in that state of not knowing the answer, I reached some very, very low places. I always sort of had this sense that I had to be here for a reason and there had to be something. And it was kind of that level of just tiny bit of hope. And sort of when I find it, I know that everything will potentially be okay. That was the glimmer of if I'm needing and struggling so hard to find it, it must be somewhere, or I wouldn't have been put here in the first place. So that sense of potential meaning that existed was always the glimmer. And then I'd say the second one was whenever I did create something, albeit dark, that felt kind of like perfect in its form, even though I knew it was a dark form, I always reached this place that I called the angels are singing, which was this place where time stopped and I was in the zone. I was in complete flow state. And I would say at those periods, I knew that had to be my thing because the loud chatter stopped and I was sort of at peace and at one with everything. So I knew if I could create things that made me feel that way, but then that I could also give to others and bring some joy to their lives, that again, I would find that sense of meaning and fulfillment.
So that is a beautiful answer, number 1. And number 2, I think that that search for meaning and that search for purpose, it's incredible how many women I've talked to that have not the same story as what you shared, but those glimmers, those things of like, I was searching, I was hunting, I was all the things. So I know, Disha, you were going to ask a question too. So I'll flip it back to you as maybe we pivot into a little bit of the success. But I think for our listeners, really hold on to what Melissa just shared and think about times, I guess, in your own life that were those glimmers, or you said the angels singing, and when you're in that vibe and you're like, well, what is all this for? What is this purpose? Because I think it shows up in our lives as we continue on our journey.
I'd love to know a little bit more, if you're open to opening up, Melissa, is what was the darkness that you were in? Because you had this transition where you could see the light and the glimmer, which I think a lot of people can't. They stay in that cycle, and you didn't do that. You came out of the darkness, and it sounds like you on purpose, so it's purposeful that you decided to continue building out of it, not go back into the cycle of it.
Yeah, it's a great question. And of course, that's what I like to share the most because hopefully others can resonate with it. But I think mine has always been a crisis of meaning, which interestingly is a non pathological condition, meaning it's not a condition that responds to medication or pharmacological intervention. It's a spiritual, philosophical condition. And from my earliest moment, I was like, why am I here? What is the meaning of life if we all ultimately expire? And what am I meant to do with this brief time here on earth? And I think in this state when I couldn't find that, and I started to believe there was no meaning to existence, and that I, as a human, had no capacity to make meaning in a meaningless existence, that's when I fell into a deep state of nihilism. And nihilism is that deep, dark sense of meaninglessness. when you don't believe you are capable of finding meaning. And it's in that state that people, do dark, dire things, because if you don't believe you can impact that state and that anything will ever change, well, then what's the point? So I think that was my low. And I felt completely disempowered to get out of that state of malaise. It was a very negative, dark, depressed state. But for me, my blurse, I call it, my blessing and my curse is the fact that I can create out of it. And I think the people I worry about are the ones that haven't yet found, their gift in it. So I think for me, ultimately, that creativity was the answer. I just hadn't figured yet out the way to turn it into light and positivity. And when we just serendipitously decided on toys, which by the way, neither of us had any, experience. I'd made lots of products, thousands of them that sat in drawers, but I never made really anything that I had given to someone or that was a consumer product. It was just like spewing stuff. But it was when I started seeing toys in my head that I suddenly had this sense of, wait a second. I thought I was completely dark. I thought I could only create darkness out of dark. And this toy is not dark. This toy is actually really pretty and light. And like I could give it to a child. And that was mind blowing. That was like, wait a second. If I can, take this very same darkness and choose whether to channel it into more darkness or channel it into light, then that right there is existentialism. It's this idea that as humans, we actually aren't powerless. We actually have a choice. And I suddenly was like, wait a second, I can choose whether to channel my very same darkness into darkness or into light. And if I want to turn off that dark faucet and turn on the light only and just keep channeling it into light, then I can, feel this sense of meaning and purpose. That's mind blowing. And that's when it all came together, just again by accident through us deciding to make toys. And I started to see that there was a way to channel darkness into light and make meaning.
I'm thinking about this pivot here and the channeling into light. When after Adish and I were first introduced to you, Melissa, we got off the call and her and I were talking, and I was like, I honestly can't think of a woman in my life with children that does not have at least one Melissa and Doug toy in their home. And we
Mhm.
started talking about our own experiences. And I had the broom, the mop, the dustpan. We literally just passed it on to a daycare in our area because it's lasted through all three of my children. My oldest is 12. I had the coffee maker with the K
Okay.
cups. And that was hands down, like that was almost painful, like almost tearful getting rid of it because I was like, this has been a staple. They acted like
Mhm.
their mom when playing with that. So to think about your journey, Melissa, and going from the darkness and channeling it into light and bringing so much joy and positivity into the lives of so many homes, millions and millions of homes. What a blessing. Like, that is just something that's incredible. So, I have a question, and we could go the
It
traditional
is
route.
quite the irony of my life that, someone
Yes.
who was in such a state of utter darkness and meaninglessness would ultimately end up making toys for children. So I think it's that inner child in me who wanted so desperately to be carefree and happy and joyful. And, I couldn't quite have it myself. But if I could create those worlds for other children, then wow, wouldn't that, be almost as meaningful or maybe more. Actually, I'll say maybe more meaningful than having it just myself.
I would say you definitely spread some light. So, for our listeners, you built something incredible. I mean, truly incredible to go on and have a $1 billion exit. Like, that is something that a lot of people can't even fathom. They can't fathom that level of success. So, as you're building out Melissa and Doug, you're channeling, you're putting your energy into it. What was far harder than people would ever have realized from the outside looking in as you built?
I would say every single thing.
Welcome to
I
entrepreneurship.
Yeah, I think the joke is that people look at the brand, the shiny brand, and they think, "Oh, it's been easy for you to, like, you just did it." And I think every single step was the hardest step ever. There wasn't anything we ever did that was easy, and every inflection point was so painful, and we must have said at least 100 times, "Should we turn in the towel? Should we give up? Should we end this?" And I think the only reason we didn't is one, we had each other. I think entrepreneurship is a very scary and lonely road. And if you don't have support, you will not make it. It doesn't have to be a partner per se, but I think you need both emotional and cognitive support the whole way. So that's why I mentor so many because I think a lot of times I'm their lifeline. But I think, we weren't in it for just the quick hit. Like, we wanted to build a legacy brand that stood the test of time and lasted generations. So I think instead of buckling when a lot of these challenges hit us, although that was our first thought, was should we just give up? With Doug's help, because I again was a very negative person early on, with his help, he helped me to stare these challenges in the eye and say, okay, we messed up again. How are we going to fix this? How are we going to move past it? And something really interesting started to happen after, years of doing that. We started to realize that we can hit roadblocks, bumps in the road, challenges. We can look them in the eye and say, okay, how did we mess up here? And we can fix these things and we can get beyond them. And it started to happen so many times that we started to sort of laugh. And instead of saying, what will we face any issues this year? We started to say, okay, what will the issues be this year? Because we realized we're not going to ever have a year without horrible issues. But we knew that once we dealt with one issue and learned from it and fixed it, we probably wouldn't deal with that exact issue again. And then one day, about 15, 20 years in, we sort of looked up and we realized, like, oh my gosh, like all those people we started with who we were, whatever, fighting it out with, duking it out with in the trenches, they weren't there anymore. In fact, no one was there. And we were sort of in this space where, the giants were still above us, the Legos and the Mattels and
Mhm.
the Hasbros, but we were kind of alone in this middle space. And we only looked for about a second and then we were like, okay, heads bent, new challenges to face because that's what it's about. And no business is going to be without its challenges, but I think it's a matter of your attitude in facing them and how you get past them.
So you said, Melissa, you came from a deep, dark place, and then entrepreneurship is lonely by itself. And coming from a dark place is also lonely, right? And you said that you were in those times an intrinsically negative person. But I see that there's some part of you that actually was optimistic at every point, because otherwise you couldn't have got from the deep, dark place to where you got to. And I assume that having Doug by your side, bringing out this actually made you shine rather than take yourself back. There was this element maybe in you that he could see, that he was like, I've got to keep pulling that from Melissa.
Yes, exactly. I think he is a huge part of, he always says, we wouldn't have started Melissa and Doug without him, but it wouldn't have been, he's so cute. He said, but it wouldn't have been successful without you. Like he just said that in a speech recently. It's very cute. But the truth is, I never would have started something entrepreneurially on my own, never, because I was too fearful and too scared. And I think he did see something, I guess. And, we did it together and he is in fact, his favorite Life is Good shirt, and I got it signed by the founders for one of his big birthdays, is cup half full because that is what Doug is. And I always joked, I wasn't even cup half empty. I had nothing in my cup. My cup was dry because yes, I was very cynical. I think I was very cynical that because I had trust issues with people early on. I couldn't trust anybody around me. And I think I was very cynical that nothing really mattered. No one really cared about me or anything. And, but I wanted to have hope. So I think, when you lose hope, then you don't go on. So the
Mhm.
reason I am still here is, even though, it got pretty dicey for a while, I always did want there to be a reason. And I was always looking still for those glimmers and for that reason. And I think once I had someone beside me who was like, we can do this, we can fight through this. But every day, yesterday, I think Doug just said, or 2 days ago, there was a basketball game on. And I told him that my team was going to lose. And the team ended up winning. The team ended up winning, my team. And he said, "You were such a negative person." And he says that to me a lot still, because, and it's not what I said. I actually answered him in a way this time. I said, it's not that I'm negative. It's that I don't want to jinx things. And I want to, like, I'm so worried about things not going well that I think I want to just pretend they didn't go well. But it's not necessarily that I'm not wanting it to happen, or, it's a little bit different than just being purely negative. I agree with you that I think there was always a silver lining of optimism in there.
How does it land with you, Melissa, when someone says to you, someone very near and dear to you says, you're very negative? Because most people would take that as criticism.
Yeah, well, I mean, people would have never imagine it now. And I think I've worked really, really hard to change my beliefs and my mindset and my perceptions. It took, years, decades of cognitive behavioral therapy and really working incredibly hard to not have the first thing I think is figures, they're going to do that to me, because that's how I was, that's what I was. So I think when they say it, I sort of say, wow, it just still shows itself once in a while, because, and I'm kind of proud of that, to be honest. I have worked really, really hard to transform that negativity into mostly positivity, but I think I'm still, at my core, probably edging on the side of negative.
So, Melissa, this is fascinating to me, and I got to call this out as to why. Because we often hear from people that have created, you know, great success, and they'll be like, you just have to always find the silver lining and stay positive and optimistic. And it kind of brings me to a question that I was thinking about as you're talking here, Melissa, is one thing that pisses me off more than anything else on the planet. Okay, maybe not more than anything else, but we're getting up there. Toxic advice for
Yeah.
entrepreneurs on social media. Like,
Mhm.
you can have it all. You can do all the things and make a bajillion dollars and raise your family and everything's fine and work 3 hours. And I just sit there and I shake my head and I'm going, oh my gosh, like, yeah, maybe if you want to make a couple bucks and you don't have a lot of things you want to do, like, sure, that's fine. But it brings me to my question, Melissa, is I mean, I think your journey is truly incredible, especially coming into this and not being that person that's the persevere over everything, the happy go lucky, the shiny, whatever, everything's good and positive. But facing that darkness, overcoming that negativity in a sense to make sure you keep persevering and pushing forward. So, as you built, we want to get real here for our listeners, the women who are tuning in that have great success, but are still climbing and they're not done. What did building something of the scale that Melissa and Doug turned out to be, what did it cost you personally that people might never see or assume?
Wow. Believe it or not, it gave me everything that I have. It really didn't cost me anything, because the meaning for me was in the striving to build it. It wasn't in the reaching a pinnacle. There's no meaning in reaching something, actually. That's the emptiest part of it, because you reach it, you take a deep breath, you're like, I'm here. And then the meaninglessness starts right back again. So, having now been a student of meaning, I'm a meaning coach. I've studied logotherapy, which is healing through meaning. So, the meaning is in the doing and the finding it. So, for me, building Melissa and Doug gave me everything. And it allowed me to be a role model to my own kids of needing to find that thing in your life that brings you so much joy that you want to invest your beautiful energy in it. And I can't think of one negative that it brought me. It taught me every major lesson I've learned. It taught me that I'll get emotional. It taught me I had resilience to fight through really dark times. It helped build this incredible relationship with Doug that we are each two halves of the pie of entrepreneurship and can really support each other. And it showed me that anybody has the capacity to see something in their head and bring it to life. And that has fostered a whole segment of my mentoring entrepreneurs to help bring their beautiful, heartfelt ideas to life. And a book I wrote about it. So to me, entrepreneurship has given me everything and taken absolutely nothing from me.
I just have one follow-up question because I can't help it. So, when you think about first of all, that was a beautiful answer. It gave you everything. It did not take anything. So, when you think about all that you poured into Melissa and Doug, and then you got to the point of sale, and I know you're not done. You're still creating. We're gonna talk about that next here in a little bit. But what did it feel like at the heart? What did it feel like emotionally to let go of something that you built from nothing?
Yeah, it felt like my heart was being ripped out of me, and it was like watching a child go off, but yet you have no more part in that child's life. Like when my children have
Mhm.
left the nest, they're still a dear part of my life, and I talk to them every day. In this case, it was going to someone who wasn't going to necessarily protect it and cherish it the way we did. And I think, that's part of the journey too. The ending of Melissa and Doug was not the fairy tale ending that we imagined, even though the irony is when you sell for $1 billion, everybody's congratulating you. And that was actually the day it closed was one of the saddest days of my life. So I thought, here's the true, here's a funny thing. Everybody's like writing me and congratulating me when very few said like, wow, how does today feel? It must be a really hard day for you. So I think, but in true, meaning fashion, right? You don't ask, why is this happening to me? Especially when we made the decisions that ended it that way. So it was, although we wouldn't have known at the time, right? Decisions you make have an outcome, and that was the outcome. And I think after, maybe wallowing for a little bit, it was like, okay, guess what? I better channel this into something else or I'm not going to be okay. And I think, having a second bite at the apple and having a chance to create something totally different from nothing in a different category for a different audience, working with different people has been nothing short of extraordinary. And if you ask me back then, like, did we do the right thing? I would have said, well, we made the decision, so there's nothing we can do about it now. I would have been pretty, realistic about it. It was most of it was getting really hard too. So I wouldn't have been a fairy tale about it. But now, if you ask me, I would have said, oh my gosh, like everything has gone exactly as it was meant to be. And that was the best decision ever.
I want to say something around the world, and I hope this comes out right. The world celebrates achievement a lot. So you achieved a milestone, you achieved an exit, and it was an incredible exit. Do you think after the journey you've been through that people also understand what fulfillment looks like? And it does sound like when you exited, you had, to me, it sounds like maybe you had a bit of grief there about the business that you had built, and now you didn't lose it, you did sell it. And naturally, something good did come out of it. And it's hard to see at that time when that season passed and you moved on to do something really fulfilling. But what I'm seeing and hearing is so much attached to achievement that people forget that there's something else that drives you and your meaning to get to where you got to.
That's beautiful. That is absolutely it. It's the extrinsic versus the intrinsic. It's the ego versus the soul.
Mhm.
And that's what I study more than anything. So I think, yes, on an egoic level, it was like the ultimate American dream, right? Build something literally in the garage and bring it to this point and have this crazy exit and everybody's cheering and celebrating. But Doug and I never did it for that. I mean, we never would have started a toy company in 1988 when nobody started businesses and left very lucrative brief careers We were 22 and 24, but we did have a one job out of college, and we never would have done that had we thought we were gonna make a lot of money. Like, if we were doing it for making a lot of money. We did it because we felt that what we were doing was meaningless, and we wanted to be able to get out of bed each day and have something that we thought could bring, a group of people joy. So I think when you do it for that, and we never thought of an exit, we never thought we were going to exit. We thought we were going to, leave when we were not alive anymore, be kind of carted out of the building. I think when you do something so passionately for the right reasons, a lot of times it works. And people definitely didn't understand that. They thought because it achieved an exit that we were, happy and we could just go retire on a beach somewhere. But, for me, again, the meaning is in the doing. So I unfortunately, and I think that's what was so, part of it was what we built, but part of it was just that I need to create and I need to channel that stuff in me. And unfortunately, it hasn't gotten any less acute. So if I'm not channeling, then I'm in trouble. So I have to, I had to figure out what I was going to do.
What is something that success gave you that maybe you didn't really want and you hadn't thought about it?
What did the success give me that I didn't want? I think it's given me some, what's the word? Some fame, some notoriety that I don't really enjoy or want. Like, I'm a very introverted person who doesn't really love, having to be shiny and or phony shiny. And I think sometimes it's amazing. Like, sometimes it's wonderful, but other times, like, I don't wanna be noticed, and I wanna be able to just be, like, able to take a walk and mutter to myself and listen to music and that type of thing. So but again, not on the scale of anybody, but in my town a little bit. So I think sometimes it'll be that. Other times it's people asking for things. When you have a big exit, suddenly all these people are coming out wanting things from you and wanting to manage your money. A lot of things that are just, a little bit like little fleas that now, you have to deal with.
Yeah. Melissa, what's interesting, I keep thinking about something you said a little bit ago, how you were saying you were talking about the dynamic with you and Doug and how you needed him in your journey and how important it is because entrepreneurship is lonely. And so I'm thinking about your path as we carry forward and all of this. I had a mentor one time. This is in the early stages. Disha knows this already, but Disha and I were talking about business partnership and the Trailblazers community and all these things. And I had a mentor tell me, like, Brittany, you don't need a partner. Like, you can do whatever you want to do. Like, you don't have to have a partner. I'm like, You don't understand. I do need a partner because it gives me a level of accountability. And, I can be accountable to myself. I'm a very driven person. Disha's a very driven person. But there's something about having somebody in your court to keep you honest, to keep you in check. And for me, that was part of like my journey where I was like, wow, I thought this person really knew me. And I felt super unseen in that moment. I knew I can do whatever. Like, it's the whole Marie Forleo, like, everything's figure outable. I get it. Like, let's go. But I like that. And that's part of our message with Trailblazers. And Melissa, why I want to just pause in this and thank you for how honest you're being through this whole thing because it can be a lonely journey. So it drives me a long winded way to a question that I have for you. Is there a part of your story that you feel people still don't fully understand?
Well, I think that's a great question. I just think the story with creative people is one that I've tried to get out, which is, people who are creative, like highly creative, are a little odd. And it's very hard for us to, like, make friends, and some of us appear antisocial and appear, I've got a lot of weird quirks, especially when it comes to being in groups. And, I did this thing last week where I was invited to a group and it really triggered me in a very bad way. And I literally was going to, like, run out in the middle of this meeting because it was just not, I don't know, it wasn't doing something for me and it was triggering me. And, like, that's part of me. And I'm very self-aware now, but I think, people want what we create, but they have a hard time accepting us for who we are. And I think really resonating with creative people is something that I think the world needs to do more of, because we don't want these people to feel stigmatized who are creating some of the greatest, works in the world. Yet, if people talk to us for a while, they might be like, wow, they're a little off. But if you're going to be coming up with ideas from nothing and you're, have this blank canvas of imagination where anything is possible, I mean, you're going to say some weird things and you're going to have some weird, outlandish ideas. And like, to be accepted for that wholly and completely, I think would be transformative for so many, especially so many young creative people.
Yes, this resonates with Brittany and I a lot, Melissa. That's all I'm saying today. I give you a bit of context around that. I'm the introvert, very, very introverted, Melissa. So I completely get where you're coming from. And I could probably come off as odd, maybe, especially if I'm not in the right room. And I have been in many rooms, like you've just said, where I've like, oh, where's the door? Maybe I should leave right now. This isn't the right place for me. Whereas Brittany, who is the perfect extrovert to my introvert, frames things beautifully and takes my ideas and multiplies them by a whole new magnitude some days, or she'll like layer her ideas onto me and I've gone off with the fairies. And normally it take one of us to bring each other back down to earth and say, okay, we have to stack this. We're really great at ideas and building stuff, but we do leave a trail of mess behind us. I'm totally honest. It's like we started building things and there's rubble everywhere that we think that someone's gonna magically pick up after us.
I love
There
that. That's a perfect blend.
there is so much truth. So we're just shaking our heads, nodding in agreement as you're talking about oddities and the rooms and the spaces because we have felt it. So, Melissa, I think about next chapters, and I think there's just merit to always having something to go towards, because otherwise you can fall into that pit of despair of feeling like you're leaving things behind. And I think you touched on that a bit with Melissa and Doug and that sale. And, maybe it wasn't exactly as you wanted in the moment, but finding that glimmer and knowing that things are where they are and where they need to be. So when you look at your next chapter, what does a meaningful life look like for you?
It's a great question. And I think more and more it's become connecting with people on a personal level. I reached this point at Melissa and Doug, and it was when I really had my, I don't know what you want to call it, my midlife crisis, when I started to realize that I was channeling now, but I was ironically channeling through a product. I was channeling through a medium. I like this light, bright product that really did not show the whole of me. And I began to feel almost as inauthentic as the products I created on the shelf. I was like, people are seeing these products, but again, this idea of the creative, right? The creative misfit, they have no idea about the person behind them. And I realized that I had this deep, dark need. I shouldn't say deep, dark need. I had this deep cavernous need to have friends and to be able to connect with real people as I truly was and be accepted and belong to some group as I truly was. And I'd say filling that cavern of deep existential loneliness has been one of the most beautiful parts of my life. And again, one of those things I never thought possible. So I would say connection is really important to me. I try to pay it forward. And really now, with all the lessons I've learned through entrepreneurship, I'm an active mentor. Doug and I have an accelerator at Duke University, and we mentor young entrepreneurs. And I also mentor tons of young girls who are stuck in this perfectionistic, social media mode. And I mentor lots of female entrepreneurs just to give them a reality check that what they're seeing and what they're thinking they need to be is not the truth. And that life, and I think at the end of the day, I'm very much a realist and I'm not a toxic positivity person. I'm about life is hard and everything is possible and you can have it all, but is it all going to be perfect? No. Are you going to always feel guilt about everything you're doing and that you're not doing it well enough? Yes. But it's still possible. And will you have moments of exquisite joy that are so beautiful that you want to bottle them up? Yes. But we also have moments when you're like, "Oh my gosh, I don't know if I can take this." Yes. So I think sharing with other women and other people has is definitely the biggest part of my next chapter.
Well, we feel incredibly fortunate that you are sharing here on the Trailblazers. And on the topic of sharing, do you want to talk about your next? Talk about what you're working on, what you're creatively putting out, because we are excited about it. Yeah.
Thank you for letting me do that. So I will say that in all my years of creating, which is my entire life, I have never felt as free and joyful and connected to anything as I have felt with the Lifelines products. I don't even know what it is and I can barely verbalize it. It's so much a product of me and I love this product so much. I think because of two things. One is, you know, getting into the flow was the only way I felt okay my whole life. It's the only time I felt okay is when I was creating, and the rest of my life was really awful. And these products sort of get you into that flow state. So I'm allowing other people to experience this joy that was so elusive for me. And then secondly, we created products for children. And we would get lots of letters, but they weren't from children. They were from their caregivers and their parents and for teachers who saw the children. But I think for now, for the first time now, I'm getting letters from people who are actually using the products themselves and seeing the impact it's having on them and how they're using it through cancer treatments and while watching one of their loved ones, pass on in hospice and in the hospital bed and with PTSD patients and like the use cases for something as simple as like meditative products and little guided art meditations that were really just designed to be, simple moments. To see the use cases has been nothing short of extraordinary for not only me, but for the team that's working so hard. So I love creating products for Lifelines. I absolutely adore my team more than anything. They're like young and working so hard. And I want this to succeed so badly for them because I've never met a group of people give it so much passion and energy. And I want to be able to allow them to continue creating these products for like decades to come.
You know what, Melissa? You said something really interesting right from the beginning to right now, which is you're always looking at a long term. You build everything with legacy in place and you want people to remember you, right? And what you created and the impact it had on their lives or their families or their loved ones, whoever it may be, right? And I'm thinking when your grandchildren someday learn about your life, what do you hope they admire the most about how you lived? And maybe not so much about what you built, but the meaning behind that. What do you hope that they admire the most?
Wow. I think that I always channel my darkness into light and strived to find meaning. In meaning, there are three core tenets of making meaning. And the third is considered the hardest and the most elusive. And it's the one I've struggled the most with, but have finally kind of mastered. And it's believing that life has unconditional meaning and that you can find the silver lining in even the unalterable, awful circumstances. So that's the one that took me the longest to believe. But I think now, once you believe that life has unconditional meaning, it means that you have to find the rainbow amidst the clouds. Like you have to find the how is this happening for me rather than why is this happening to me? And I think that mindset, albeit hard for me many days, is what I want to show others that life will be hard. There will be unalterable circumstances, but even in those times, there's still meaning and we can find the meaning and we can still move forward despite the boulders in our path.
Melissa, the irony in what you just shared there. So I had a mentor. His name was Sean Stevenson. He spoke on global stages. He was known as the 3-foot giant because he had a bone disease where he was in a wheelchair his whole entire life. When he was little, like you touch him and his bones could break. But he passed away. It's been a handful of years ago now. But down to the moment on his deathbed, a friend of mine, Joe Polish, the founder of Genius Network, was there with him. And he literally said, "This is happening for me, not to me." And so it just kind of took my breath away a little bit there as you were talking, because that is something that, Disha and I have talked about, that we've talked about in and amongst our Trailblazers community. And I'm just so grateful that you shared that from your own experience. So, my last question, and I think because, we've gone on this journey with you, Melissa, of, where you started and how you channeled and what you've built and what it took and your legacy and all these things. So, if you were sitting in front of little Melissa, the little girl that was channeling that darkness, that maybe was searching for purpose, that didn't really understand in that moment what that meant for her, what would you say to her about the life that you've built?
Oh, well, I think what I wanted in those moments, if I'm just to go back then, I would have said, you know, don't worry, like you will find it. Just keep opening yourself up to curiosity and keep following the little breadcrumbs wherever they lead. And whatever you do, keep creating. Even if it's dark, keep channeling, keep creating, keep sharing, keep learning, and ultimately you will find the path. I'm not sure what it'll be, but I promise you, if you keep at it, you will find it.
Beautiful. Disha, before we wrap, anything that I missed? What did we miss? Did we miss anything?
No, Melissa, do you think we missed anything?
I really don't. The only thing, I think we didn't touch on is just family, children, and that elusive bad word of balance. That's probably, the question I'm asked most. I'm glad you didn't ask it, but it is something that people always ask about, especially women.
So, with those lines, because we do, a lot of our community members and followers, they are women who've built success. They've gone beyond a certain threshold. They often have children. So, let's drop that nugget. What is one piece of advice you'd have? A woman is building simultaneously incredible business and raising a family and choosing to be very involved in that family. What piece of advice would you give?
Yeah, I think it's also very existential philosophy, which is if you want to work, there's two sides of this. I think early on, I met a lot of women who were very angry that they had to work. And I always found it fascinating because they felt guilty. They didn't want to work. They wanted to be at home with their kids. And they communicated that anger and that guilt to their children and sort of gave their kids this impression like that work is awful, that they don't want to be there and they want to be home. And I really used this kind of as a lesson because I thought, well, wait, what message are they giving to their children? Right? They're basically saying to their children, like, work life is awful. And then what does that mean their children are going to grow up looking forward to? If they're communicating that it's horrible to grow up and it's horrible to work and all you want to be is at home with them, then what's the point of their kids striving and working hard and finding things they love? So I vowed very early on, because for me, working wasn't something I would ever not do. Like I knew from very early on that I needed that meaning. I needed something that was completely my own. And I also needed a family. Like I wanted to be a mom more than anything. I wanted to have that thing that was my own more than anything. So once I started to see all these women that were so like unsettled and upset about working, I said, I've chosen to want to work and I have to communicate that choice very clearly to everyone in my life. Doug obviously knew early on that I had to have something that was my own and certainly always like accepted it and wanted it for me. And the minute I had kids, I started to communicate to them, even though I did feel guilty. I started communicating to them that this is something I love and this is something I'm building and this is something I'm so excited about. And through the years, whenever they said, because they did, Why aren't you the mom that's in the classroom? Why aren't you the art smart mom? Why aren't, at everything that the other moms who stay at home are? I said, I love you. I wish I could be, but this is what I'm doing. And let me share what I'm doing and how it's helping people and touching people. And my goal for you is that one day you find something that you love as much as I love Melissa and Doug. And I tried to make it so that you don't have just one thing you love, that life is about a ton of things you love, and you can, love is unending. You have enough love to give every single thing in your life. So I think I've been a flawed parent in so many ways. Don't ask my kids. But, one thing I'm very proud of is all six of them are, you know, have careers. A lot of them are entrepreneurs, and I have 4 daughters and 2 sons. They'd never think twice about not working because, although it was far from perfect, and I always felt guilty about not giving enough to both my work and my children, we still did it, right? Albeit flawed, but we did it.
How interesting that you say that too, Melissa, because I do think a lot of this is about perspective. So I always say that being able to work and earn money is a privilege. I come from an immigrant family. And so that guilt that now I feel, my mum always says, this is a new feeling for you because it's not something she ever had to go through because all she knew is that she has to wake up and she has to go to work. And it's a privilege for her to be able to do that in a country where she's feels relatively safe and able to go and earn money as a woman, right? And so a lot of this I do think is perspective too. So I've never thought of, and I've met many women like you have, Melissa, who feel cross that they have to do this. But the other side of that is how grateful are you that you can do that? The alternative is that you don't even have the choice. So how lucky is it that you have the choice to be able to either stay home or to build something amazing?
Exactly. I love that. That's another really good angle to add, and I will keep that in mind the next time. I like that.
Oh,
Yeah, it is a privilege.
Melissa, thank you. Thank you for showing up. Thank you for being so authentic for our listeners, for us. And we're going to make sure that we put in the show notes, Lifelines, all the details there that we help promote that. And Melissa, we're just so grateful for you.
Oh my gosh, what an amazing conversation. Your questions were incredible, some of the best ever. So, thank you so, so much for this incredible conversation. And if anybody wants to connect with me, I'm Melissa at lifelines.com. Happy to do that for your listeners, viewers. And thank you.
If this episode supported you, share it with a woman you respect and want to lift up.
Join our free Trailblazers community, the space where high achieving women finally feel met.
You'll find the link in the show notes.
Until next time, keep moving forward, keep listening to yourself.
And remember, you deserve support too.